So in the first panel, we have Mr. S. Vijay Kumar, who would moderate the session. So I would invite Mr. Vijay Kumar to the stage. Is he here? Okay. So as he is coming to the stage, I just introduce him. Mr. S. Vijay Kumar is a distinguished fellow at TERI. He specializes in policy issues concerning natural resources like land, water, and minerals. He's a mentor at TERI and has co-authored policy papers on mineral resources and environmental governance. He's also a member of the United Nations International Resource Panel since 2015. Additionally, he leads the Food and Land Use Coalition India program, focusing on sustainable agriculture and food production in collaboration with TERI, WRI, CEEW, and RRAN. Prior to TERI, he held positions in the IAS, including permanent secretary roles in the Ministry of Mines, Ministry of Rural Development. Mr. S. Vijay Kumar. Thank you so much, sir. And our panelists for the session are first, Mr. Ashish Mondal, who's the Managing Director, Plowman Agro Private Limited. Mr. Ashish Mondal. He's the founding director of ASA, brings over 30 years of experience in improving smallholder livelihoods, sustainable agriculture practices, and promoting agribusiness initiatives. He was a member of the National Advisory Committee, served on key committees at NABARD, consulted for prestigious international organizations, co-authored books on community projects, and currently leads an agribusiness startup focused on connecting smallholders with agriculture value chains through farmer-producer organizations. Mr. Ashish Mondal, welcome, sir. Next, we have Ms. Reshma Anand. Reshma Anand is the Regional Director of Ford Foundation. Is she here? Yeah, okay. So Reshma Anand, the Ford Foundation's Regional Director, brings over 2 decades of dynamic leadership spanning corporate, non-profit, and social venture sectors. Please come. With a passion for informed philanthropy, she drives impactful solutions for rural development challenges, fostering partnerships and dialogue to catalyze positive changes across India, Nepal, and Sri Lanka. Reshma is passionate about driving informed philanthropy in India through dialogues, collaborative learning platforms, and partnerships with government. She is an economics graduate from the University of Delhi and an MBA from IIM Bangalore. Welcome, Reshma ji. Next, we have Mr. Roshan Tamak, Executive Director and CEO, Sugar Business, DCM Shriram Limited. Mr. Tamak, as Director and CEO of Sugar and Ethanol Businesses at DCM Shriram Limited, brings over 30 years of experience in driving strategic growth in the Indian sugar sector with a focus on sustainability. He completed the Advanced Management Program at Wharton School and IIM Ahmedabad and is a regular speaker at national and international seminars. His leadership roles at ISMA, IISR, and accolades like the SEIA Best CEO and Lifetime Achievement Award highlight his industry experience. Pleasure to have you, sir. And finally, of course, we have Mr. Avinash Mishra, who is the former advisor of Niti Aayog. Please. Mr. Mishra, with 30 plus years in water resources and environmental governance, is the former advisor at Niti Aayog and honorary chairman at the Water Audit Council. Holding degrees in civil engineering and water resources from IIT Delhi, he specializes in national policies, including irrigation, flood control, and drinking water supply. Avinash ji has led initiatives like PM Krishi Sinchai Yojana, Jal Jeevan Mission, and Atal Bhu Jal Yojana, contributing to key reports on water management and sustainability. Pleasure to have you with us, sir. I will now hand over the panel to Mr. Vijay Kumar. Thank you, sir.
Yeah, thank you very much. Um, we start on a great note because we had two outstanding keynote speakers, Dr. Ajay Mathur and Dr. Gulati. And if I might say so, while Dr. Mathur focused on what is possible, I think Dr. Gulati very rightly focused on where we have made our mistakes. So today in this panel, we are looking at issues related to adaptation. In one sense, it's an effort to correct mistakes. But we are also conscious, I think, particularly keeping in view what Professor Gulati said about how we have despoiled our resource base, that actually our adaptive capacity has reduced as a result. So while on the one hand, we have engineered climate change which needs to be addressed, on the other hand, the resource base from which you would address it is that much worse. So we have a double whammy here in one sense. And I will not take too much time on dwelling on it myself, but I have with me four eminent panelists, so I will hand over this onerous task to them as to how do we look at these issues. Just as a kind of introduction, and in order to provide a kind of lead, I can say that while initially the focus of climate change internationally was on mitigation, over the years it has been realized that mitigation is not a complete solution. And based on the third assessment report, I think now the COPs are increasingly and under pressure from developing countries also focusing on adaptation. And the COP27 was perhaps the COP where there was an explicit mention of the need to protect vulnerable sections of the community, which was later expanded in COP28 to look at the sector as a whole, to improve adaptive capacity, use resources better, to look at water, agriculture, food, safety nets, social protection, all of which in the Indian context resonate particularly in the context of the policies we are currently pursuing. So I will now request the panelists to reflect on these issues, and we have sort of had a small internal consultation. So I will put to them first a question which perhaps they are best fitted to answer. And then I'll put in a second round a common question so that we elicit the different perspectives of those in corporates, those in the NGO sector, in the government, Ford Foundation, and hopefully the composite view will give us a better understanding of what adaptation really involves. As a mental picture, one thinks of adaptation to climate change in agriculture as responding to higher temperatures, but it's much, much more than that. I mean, there are issues of temperature, issues of water availability, but also, and these are what are called slow onset events, but also, sudden onset events or extreme weather events, cyclones, thunderstorms. We had a dust storm yesterday in Mumbai. High snowfall, erratic rainfall. All these adverse climatic events, they need adaptation strategies. But it's not possible to adapt to everything. So you have to look at the risk of an event happening and devote our scarce resources towards addressing those risks which are likely to affect most, to which we are most vulnerable. And I think that is the issue which policymakers, social scientists, communities, governments need to look at and use science, of course, for that purpose. As science evolves, as our understanding improves. So I will leave these thoughts with you, basically that it's not only slow onset events, it's also sudden onset events, and it is variable. It's not the same problem everywhere. Coastal areas have different problems, hill areas have different problems, the central highlands have different problems. So how do we look at adaptation at policy level, at strategy level, at local level, in actually adapting, coping, and building resilience? Professor Gulati talked about the two resiliences. I think that's the important thing that we have to keep in mind. Now, how do we recover? When all else fails, despite our best adaptive strategies, climate overwhelms us, we still have to recover. What do we do for that? So these are things we need to ponder over. So I will request our panelists one by one to give their thoughts on the subject. So let me start with Reshma. And I'll go back to COP. COP28 refers to both adaptation and resilience building to reduce vulnerability. In the Indian context, what do you think are the current practical limits to adaptation? And to what extent must we improve our recovery processes when proactive adaptation fails or adaptation fails in order to build that resilience in local communities?
Thank you, and it's wonderful actually to be in a room with a lot of old friends and former partners and even current partners. I'm also going to, put out almost a disclaimer as I start responding to your questions, sir, because I think we all come from different vantage points, and I would probably like to base, what I'm sharing based on the experience, the conversations, the dialogues that we've had, I've had in various roles with farming communities across the country, and over at least, I'd say, 2 decades. What's interesting when we talk about climate, either from an adaptive or a mitigating lens, is that actually we know the solutions. We can actually rattle them off saying that it's a function of soil conservation, crop diversification, short duration varieties, drought resistant varieties, water conservation, more effective, land use, risk mitigation through insurance, livelihood diversification, advanced, weather alert systems, technology, innovations, drones, AI, and whatnot, right? So there's almost like a prescription that is actually ready when we start looking at the aspects of the scientific capital that we have to, to address and respond effectively to climate change. I would argue that we also have financial capital, and it may be disaggregated, in subsidies across various lines of work, across ministries. But let's assume that actually even the financial capital is not a challenge. I think when we talk about resilience and adaptation, the one thing that does not get talked often about is human capital. So we know the what, but the who and the how actually needs a lot more attention if we need to actually address and have some form of response to the kind of challenges that we are likely to face and foresee over the next decade and so on, for as long as we exist as a planet. So when we talk about who, it's really interesting that the farmer's always missing from these conversations, right? Whatever the numbers may be, whether it's 150 or 250 billion farmers in the country, the fact is a large number of them are women, small landholders, working as both labor and cultivators. And they're often missing from the dialogue or the conversation around practices to actually address and mitigate agriculture. The vulnerabilities that they face also are very distinct based on the context. We talked about regional geographies, whether you're in the coastal plain, whether you're in the hill regions, whether you're in the Gangetic plain. The vulnerability on account of weather events is also very distinct. And then when you look at, we used to call it the holy trinity of soil, water, and land use. Typically, a lot of solutions tend to be extremely unitized, right? So the fact of the matter is that success in agriculture is not just a function of soil, but it's also a function of water and of land use. And I would argue that we've actually tried to maybe simplify and oversimplify solutions to the extent that we're only solving for one aspect and we're not able to look at the system as a whole and understand where are the sources of vulnerability as well. So we're starting from the premise that we do have scientific capital, we do have financial capital. It's messy, it's disaggregated, it's sitting in subsidies, it's fragmented across various line departments. We worked extensively in water, and we worked with Pradhan and continue to work with Pradhan and even with Ashish's organization. The thing that we realized was that water, which is such an integrating factor, is actually split between at least 2 digit line departments, right, across government. And so, when we talk about convergence, I think the convergence is really what is important, and that's what's going to make the big difference. So on one hand, we recognize that we've not actually looked at human capital enough, right? This battle is going to be won by individuals at the front line. Those individuals happen to be farmers in this country. And so how are we looking at how are they at the heart and center of any conversation that we may have, any strategies that we want to develop on adapting and building resilience towards climate change, but also looking at what would drive, convergence. Convergence when it comes to finance, convergence when it comes to policy. So you don't have, water and agriculture now actually need to, and forests need to be in sync. And unless that happens, to be able to create those kind of solutions on the ground will also continue to be a challenge. When we talk about human capital, we had very promisingly in the 60s, 70s started building an extension corridor for this country, right? We're 6.5 lakh villages. We talk about employability as a challenge in India. Those are the number of jobs waiting to be created for a climate extension force in the country as well, right? Because we do need science and people to actually deliver on the ground. It's not just going to happen because we've got the innovations in place, or even if the financing is in place. Because that's what will actually lead to true community-led participation in terms of actually creating a shared future. So whether it's just a slow burn or it's a dramatic, weather event, it's not something that individuals can actually solve for. And I think this whole convergent lens across policies, across finance, across the first mile, literally, who's going to be at the front line of, of mitigating this crisis is really important. And understanding at the end of the day that this is about changing behavior, and all of us are part of it, but also for farmers. It's really interesting that we expect, farmers to do what is right. It's almost like this expectation, right? But maybe also think through why. What's in it for, the large number of, farmers in this country. And it is very important to not forego the role that women farmers can play, because wherever we've seen women farmers lead work on climate resilient agriculture, we've seen very, very significant, I would argue dramatic results as well. But they're missing in all of these conversations as well. So it's really important for any adaptation to be successful is to recognize that there is a pool of solutions and there is finance, and finance is there in its not the most appropriate, but it is ready, it's waiting in the wings. It can actually be leveraged and mobilized. But the human capital aspect is very important to focus on, because that's really what's going to tip the scales in terms of how successful our adaptation strategies would be. And I actually come back after every visit to the field with immense hope. It's not misplaced. It also tells me that there are ways in which we can move a very difficult issue, but ensuring that we're investing as much in people and the first mile, because this is going to be something that's going to be fought at the level of a watershed, at the level of a climate zone, at the level of a geography. So how are we actually galvanizing communities with those resources and the wherewithal to actually address this? It gives me heart to see that if villages can come together and plan for water through a participatory process, why is it difficult to conceive that they can even plan for climate and do it jointly, right? So it's actually, this is the interesting and fascinating aspect around, as we travel across the country, that the principles are almost like staring at us in the face. The moment we start looking at things from an integrated system lens, it becomes very clear who's missing from the equation, how do we bring them in, and can that lead to better outcomes for us as well?
Thanks, Reshma. I think the point about planning together is, of course, at the crux of it. And it's interesting that you brought in the role of women and women farmers, and recognizing the role that women have had in farming, food, agriculture throughout, and more so in areas that are stressed, where the men folks seasonally migrate out for other jobs, leaving the women to actually manage the agriculture. And so that brings me to naturally to Ashish on roughly the same issue, vulnerable groups. And as I was saying, COP27 first recognizes the need to ensure the adaptation of vulnerable groups, including women, indigenous people, small-scale farmers. How do you think adaptation plays out for them? What is being done, perhaps? Is it enough? Obviously not. What more needs to be done? What are the barriers, challenges, possible solutions? And by the way, I hope we can finish one round, in 5 minutes each, and then do a second round where we get on to some of the same things from individual sectoral perspectives. But basically, the issue: how do we look at adaptation in the context of vulnerable groups or less advantaged groups?
Okay, thank you, Vijay. Thank you, organizers, for this opportunity. Okay, let me just, one thing that I believe very strongly, that I believe that the entire farming community is vulnerable. So, a community which is kind of contributing only 14% to the GDP, but if I take his argument for the entire food system, then it's probably more, but then let's stick to that where they are. And 40%, 45%, 50% of the younger generation, they don't want to go back to the farming any longer. And I think the last NSS was saying that 53 or 54% of the income of the farming family is not from the farming, it's coming from some other sources. So, which is very clear indication that the entire community is vulnerable. But anyway, coming to the context of our discussion today, that adaptability in the context of climate change of the farming community. I mean, look, I think that farming communities, one such community, they are very, very pro adaptation. Had that not been the case, we would probably be starving today, because from 1960s where we have reached today, it is all because this farming community has adopted to different technologies and the science that prescribed to them, and they have adopted to it. That's why we are here. In the context of climate change, so what is that they need to adopt? Let us talk about it. So what does that mean? That are we expecting higher variability in rainfall? Yes. Most of our crops are like thermosensitive, so higher temperature in the month of January or in the month of December, which will impact the wheat production. More pest and insect attack because of temperature variations. If these are the case, then I think there is an obvious reason for them to change just to survive. It's a survival instinct. Now, in that context, the adaptability will be more or less. It depends on that how other things are provided to them. And there are 4 or 5 things they play very strongly for the farmers' adaptations. A is the robustness of the technology. What are we prescribing to them? B is the affordability. C is the policy environment. D is the market. And last is the institutional framework, right from top to the bottom. I'll explain one by one. Now, robustness of the technology, if you see that we have government institutions, we have private institutions, they are constantly evolving and prescribing something to the farming community. We know the technologies being researched or prescribed by the ICER. Their clear mandate is to do that. And to what extent they are being implemented on the ground. I don't want to get into the detailing of it. That simply says that their technology is not robust enough for a kind of a large-scale adoption. On the other hand, we see the private sector R&D. That's also not less today. If you look at the hybrid seed production, hybrid seed, the entire thing is now controlled by the private sector. The entire vegetable seed is being produced by the private sector. All planting materials for the fruits and vegetables are being produced by the private sector. And I'm sure they're driven by the profit, not by exactly the climate change issues. Today, there is no regulation to control them. So they must be doing it in their own way. But there, the ICER, I don't know, how are they managing that fine balance? Affordability in a village context, one size fits all is not going to work. And we have failed to provide options to the villagers so that different types of villagers, they can adopt as per the suitability. So a basket of options have not been given. C is the policy environment. I won't go into the detail of it, but Mr. Gulati has said a lot about it, but yet some of the policies, like, which can make a revolution in terms of climate change adaptation, but we are probably not mindful of them. Let's say watershed approach. It worked so well on the ground in the 1990s, in early 2000, but we just have left it somewhere. There were some efforts to kind of align NREGA with the watershed. That also somewhere lost. I think there is a lot of requirement in terms of policies. He said reproposing, reshaping. I fully endorse that view. We need to seriously think about it in terms of keeping the climate change in the middle of it and see that how our policies can actually contribute to that. The market definitely is going to play a big role. They are playing already a big role. But the one new thing that has happened in the recent years, that is ESG, is actually driving everybody. The carbon neutrality is something driving all big corporations of the world. They are looking for commodity produced under sustainable environment. They're ready to pay price for it. you look at the carbon credit. I know that that mechanism is still not fixed fully, but things are getting better. Now, and there is a compulsion for them. I don't know if you are aware of it. In the European Union, the number of acts that they are going to enact this year and 2026, if they are true, then these corporations have to prove that their entire supply chain is actually sustainable, right from the raw material to the final consumer's product. And it is going to be mandatory because it will be governed by the Act. And if that is true, this will be a kind of a game changer, to my mind. Traceability, precision agriculture, all of these are going to be a reality. How are we aligning ourselves? What is that Indian corporations are doing? What is that SEBI doing? What is the other such industrial associations are thinking about it? We need to probably have a discussion with them and see that how are we align ourselves global trend. I know for sure, with our limited experience, that the companies who depend on raw materials from this country, and they are answerable to the global community and as well as to that act which is going to come, ready to pay good price for the raw materials, premium, provided we show them that it is definitely genuine, sustainable, and it's traceable. What does that mean? They're ready to factor in that cost of premium in their final product. And we have done a calculation that, we do organic cotton. We have done that calculation. About 3 to 4 cents per kg of lint, if you add to that, which is in the final product, garment level, may not be even 0.0001%. If that is added in the cost of lint, which is very insignificant, a watershed of 500 hectares can be treated for 5 to 7 years with a $250 per hectare generated out of it. And this is calculated and in a projection sheet and of course tested with few experiences and all. We need to understand this and see whether that is also possible for the Indian corporations, because we do not export too much of food commodities and other things except few. Why can't the Indian industries become responsible? How long they would look for free raw materials, literally free raw materials from the farmers? They don't pay anything. Is there a way to bring a legislation and make them also answerable for, because they are also equally responsible for the destroying the conditions. And my last point about the institutional framework, we have a huge SHGs, FPOs, cooperatives. I see they are going to play a very, very big role, important, significant role for this kind of spread of these adaptations. So yeah, these are my few points. Thank you.
Thank you. I, for one, would like to underline particularly reference to watersheds. The role of watersheds in improving the resource base for agriculture and doing proactive adaptation and increasing the flexibility of an adaptive response and improving the resilience of local communities cannot be overstated. And I've been seeing this since IWMP, IWDP, Haryali, even Wasteland Development Program of the 80s, Ford Foundation had a role there. And it is a fact that I think watersheds are now not the same priority that they were earlier, because in my view, it has now been merged or linked with the Krishi Sinchai Yojana. And so it is seen as a subset of that. Whereas it is very rightly, as you said, a freestanding program which needs to be, increased and replicated and used for a variety of purposes. So I think this is a point which resonates well with, I think, all of us. Let me now request Roshan for his views. We have talked about government policies and talked about development programs, but how do you see private sector and civil society and their role in creating an attitudinal framework that favors adaptation and resilience building at the non-governmental and local levels, so that the government cannot do everything, obviously. It can set the lead, it can make the enabling conditions, but ultimately farming is a private enterprise. The farmer has to see his own benefit. So how do you see the roles of the non-state actors?
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to share my views. And thanks organizers for organizing this wonderful conference. To the top, private sector can do. At my strong conviction is that private sector is very well placed and uniquely placed to pursue sustainability objectives. And we ourselves, being in agri-processing, as in this Ram, so I can very well narrate a few experiences which I'm trying to do. And I am quite hopeful that those will be of use to everybody. And fully agree that the government cannot do everything. Particularly to create a culture, there are 3 steps required. One is engagement, second is education, and third enforcement. At least engagement and education can be organized by private sector. Enforcement obviously will be done by government. We operate 4 sugar plants in central UP, and we have approximately 200,000 smallholders who are supplying cane to us. In our catchment area, we have created partnerships, and we have developed one multi-stakeholder partnership, which is joined by organizations like multi agencies like International Finance Corporation, civil society organizations like Solidarity, government institutes like Indian Institute of Sugar Cane Research and Sugar Breeding Institute, technology providers like New Zealand, NatFim, and Evolus for irrigation, or ICT companies like Mahindra and Mahindra and few startups. So we have stitched this partnership. Clear enables and clear deliverables are there for each part. That for what they have to do, and they have committed their resources also. We have developed matrices for measurement. Baseline is there, midline is there, top line is there. And if we just illustrate the pillars for that partnership, there are 6 pillars. Adoption of good agricultural practices, improving soil health, improving water use efficiency, developing micro entrepreneurs, digitalization, and of course, sustainability certification. These are the 6 broad parameters. And of course, gender inclusion is also one of the priority area in all activities. So we have located clear sources, clear organization for that. And we created an enabling ecosystem by setting 4 soil testing labs, 2 biocontrol labs, developed 200 plus micro entrepreneurs for custom hiring model for propagating mechanization. And also, we have provided resources like Dr. Gulati mentioned, soil health, organic carbon. And we have developed 18,000 compost pits in our area, 18,000. And for leveraging government schemes, such wonderful schemes government has developed, like Kusam Yojana, for example. Solarization of irrigation is our priority. We have put our own person to handhold with farmers to support them in uploading the application, getting the subsidy, getting the machines, everything. This ecosystem has been developed the help of civil society organization and multilateral agency and technology providers. And it has given good results. Just to cite a few, for example, water, the most critical resource. Dr. Gulati and others, I feel really pleasure to share that during last 7 years, with adoption of time-tested practices like soil mulching, composting, skip from planting, and other measures, we have been able to save 756 billion liters of water in the catchment area of our factories. And this has been authenticated by Indian Institute of Sugar and Research. And here, I shall also like to mention that we need to be cognizant of adopting both. We should not ignore the time-tested practices. Trash mulching, what is rocket in it? Why? Farming of is the need of the hour. We have to be ready, but we have to have both. Like time-tested practices should be done at large scale because those are proven. And we should try the new technologies. And for that, we have engaged with 4 startups. With Ministry of Information and Technology, we have provided them our farms to test out the technology, and we have formalized the arrangement with them so that new technology is also tried and it is adopted, it is proven. So my strong view is that corporate sector can play a very vital and important role in adoption of all these practices, and because they are right away there in farmers, their ability, their engagement is of different level, and we can leverage all government schemes also and become a channel for that. This is my view. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It was interesting hearing him. The National Mission on Sustainable Agriculture, which is government's response to climate change requirements in various sectors, they have 10 key interventions. And the 6 pillars that you mentioned correspond very closely to them. So I think it only shows that, frameworks governments can create, but taking it forward and particularly to the ground level, that with that alignment, private sector and non-governmental sector can leverage the ecosystems created by government to reach to local communities. I will now come to Avinash as the last question. And I will continue with technologies. And since he has been in Niti Aayog, which was tasked with developing policies to transform, what, Avinash, do you think are some of the more promising technologies in the Indian context where perhaps government and private sector need to make proactive investments for development and deployment in order to help in adaptation? Just to give an example, we have early warning systems for weather events. That enables, particularly both for slow onset and sudden onset events. Advance warning for rainfall that's likely to impact the agriculture in terms of water availability over extended periods. So what do you think are some of the technologies that are currently on the horizon where we should be looking at further developments in order to improve the adaptive response?
Thank you. See, we are in a time while the adaptation is to be done, and we can frame the policies, regulations, everything. There are the innovation centers also, like ICRA, IRI, and all these things. But there is a big gap. The reason of the gap is that our farmer, which majority of the farmer are lying with a 0.6 to 1 hectare of farm holding. And now we cannot actually expect from such a landholder to transform overnight or to change the cropping pattern. So there is a handhold support is required. More so, if you see still the practice of farming is the same age-old practice. We have not modernized. We might have modernized in tilling by introducing tractors or by some very smaller technology options, but not the larger options. Like we have got 15 agriculture agroclimatic zones. So what type of crop will be suited to these agroclimatic zones? And if it is at all suited, and if these are the details are there, they are very much with the ICRI or IRI. It has not yet got into the to the farmers field. So that is one big thing is required. As far as what the government has done, so government has already identified and developed the genotypes for 136 crop where the carbon dioxide sequestration will happen. They have also identified some 156 genotypes where the seeds will be developed which can sustain in the extreme climatic situations like hot weather, low rainfall, maybe in the saline soil and also in flooded area. So these are some of the options at the end of the government where they have done it. They have also tested it into 450 villages of the country. But to expect them with all the villages, you see this is a big gap, and this gap needs to be filled by the state government, by the other agencies. As you see, multiplicity of agencies, there are many agricultural universities, colleges, and all are there, and all are confined to their own domain. No one is coming forward to help the poor farmer. Another thing is very important, that while we see there should be a prescription that if a landholder of 0.6 hectare landholding, then in what way he will be sustainable? What type of prescription we need to provide him? He should go for this crop as it's suited to his agroclimatic zone. This crop is also costly, will give him the proper price. He should also go for livestock, which type of livestock he should do, and in the change climatic conditions, whether this livestock will be suited to him or not. Then again, the market linkages for all. The government has developed one app which is called Meghdut, which is giving the district level the variation in the climate. This district level variation of the climatic, all this fine, but we need to seek in this particular area how many farmers are growing the groundnut, which will go to this mandi. And if it will go to mandi, then what will be the price at that time? And how many storages are there? So all these things are definitely missing links. Those are required to make the farmer sustainable. But definitely, as far as the adaptation strategies are concerned, we need to proceed ahead on these lines to create the more and more the such type of seeds which can tolerate. Pradhan Mantri Krishi Sinchai Yojana is there, PM Kusum is there, watershed which you said, definitely it has been brought under the ambit of the Pradhan Mantri Krishi Sinchai Yojana. And you can always say me as a culprit of bringing that, because I thought that only doing the big dams and then going for watershed development and all that, but the area which is left in between, there should be again watershed development, there should be focused, the moisture content should be available for at least single crop for every farmer. So, but definitely the government's rules gets changed and they say, no, this particular thing, for instance, I am saying the command area development where the field channels are to be created. The government has come out and said, okay, it can be created with Manrega funds also. Manrega has become a sort of a big umbrella fund where all things whichever is not getting possible, it can be done with Manrega fund. And because of that, the targets are always missing. And with those missed targets, again, the linkages are there. We could not get the Manrega release funds, or we could get again the problem of only the material component is allowed 20%, 80% should be waste. in the district headquarters, okay, it is 60-40%. So all these problems are there. Those are all bureaucratic problems. If one go ahead to solve them, then again another set of problems comes up. What will happen to the villagers? Those are there. Why we should go only for material? So I think the private sector should come and intervene, because this should be very much, one should think that the agriculture, of course, might be contributing 16%, 14% directly, and indirectly so many industries and many other things are based on that, which perhaps we are not calculating. I am not agriculturist, but I am definitely thinking why they are not being calculated. But anyway, they are the prime of the economy. The economy starts moving when the agriculture crop comes. Then only the tractor sales increases, bike sale increases, garment sale increases, everything happens. So the agriculture should not be left the way it should be given due attention, and it should not be considered only the GDP contribution. It is much more higher than GDP contribution, and we should also find out what is the indirect contribution to prime moving the economy of the agriculture sector. That is very important. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. We are run out of time, so I don't think I'll take the second question, which in any case most of the panelists have answered one way or the other. I just want to respond to that NREGA point, since I was in Ministry of Rural Development. And I do agree that, NREGA needs to be oriented more towards, climate change issues, particularly adaptation. But then actually almost all schemes should be subjected to a adaptation audit or a climate audit, and see whether they can be aligned a little better in terms of adaptation and even mitigation. I think with the same, same buck, you get a bigger bang. I think that's what we should be looking for. So I'll not go for a second question. Instead, I think I would request in the audience, if there are any questions, maybe we could have a small round of questions on that, so that we understand from the ground what the vibes are. And so let me throw this open to the floor. And please introduce yourself, and we'll take maybe just 2 or 3 questions, because we are running into the next panel. So the floor is open.
Can I make an observation? I'm MV Ashok, retired Chief General Manager of NABARD, and I do work in many of the areas that's happening right now, and that's my interest in coming over here. I was listening to Mr. Roshan Lal, and I really hats off to you to what you're doing in the areas where you're currently doing your project. I only find a small issue that most of the corporates, they would like to work in the areas where they have their factories. I mean, rightly so, I don't blame them, but nevertheless, what happens is many of the other areas get neglected. So what do we do about it? Now, as far as CSR of corporates are concerned, this may be a pattern, but CSRs of banks, for instance, they are, geography agnostic. They can go anywhere and work, and that does help a little. So this is one issue this is not a question, by the way, this is only an observation, and I wanted to bring it to the notice of this August group, so that we could think of this as well when it comes to policy making at the higher levels. This is what I wanted. Thank you.
Yes, I think there is no response as such, but like for example, we not only work in our area, we work in other areas as well, our company. So, and this should be the approach. I fully agree. Only one thing, because the second question is not there, you have mentioned about the challenge. What is the challenge? So just want to give a feel of the ground briefly. See, farmer does not understand the sustainability. Let's be clear. He has to be demonstrated the value of sustainability in economic value. For example, adoption of trash mulching. When we told him that your 2 irrigations are saved due to trash mulching, then adoption level increased. So we need to demonstrate the value proposition of sustainability initiatives. If we say water will be saved, so I think that will not fly quickly, but economic value has to be demonstrated.
Yeah, thank you. My name is Shuryamani Rahul. I represent a new organization called Forum of Enterprises for Equitable Development, working on marginal farmers. My specific question to, again, Roshan Lalji. I know I compliment the corporate as well as you for bringing all these things, the relations. I have also seen the movie on this. Is it only confined, all the technologies and the practices being promoted, are they confined only to sugar cultivation or the crops the farmer is engaged in? The specific question to, second thing, I just like to add also, I was a part of the study on the climate smart agricultural practices in India for the Asia Foundation. And I found that climate smart villages concept has really worked in depth and breadth, just to complement and add to the deliberations. Thank you.
Just to respond to your question, undoubtedly our entire ecosystem is sugarcane centric, but not against to any crop. For example, in our area, we encouraged 16,000, we in fact organized 16,000 hectare intercropping with pulses, with potato, which are compatible to sugarcane. The idea is to increase the income of the farmers and improve the land use efficiency. So that is the response.
Good morning. My name is Arun Kumar. Hope I'm audible. So I am with a firm called Amrut Nature Solutions. We are a carbon consultant basically. There is no question from me. It is just an observation. So when we see as agri as the farmers facing an issue in agri, etc., we miss out the point, like we consider it as a problem only with the policies or how we enhance the livelihood of the farmers. The striking part, what I'm missing out is, like, we don't talk about biodiversity as one of the whole issues that is like causing the entire climate change issue, and that could possibly be a solution as well. Biodiversity, I don't just mean about like the crop diversification part. It's about all the microbes and the animals which is part to it. And this is not the first forum, and as you all know, like since we are attending so many forums, biodiversity is the least talk about for issues or like the concerns which could be a practical solution. So I would say, like, of course, we are doing like a lot of work on ground, working with the communities and with the agri sector, etc. But it also is very important to understand like the intrinsic roles the different animal groups do, even for watershed management. You know, like when we talk about the large rivers, like the dolphins, we never speak about like the entire sedimentation issue is controlled by a single species for thousands of years. And I just want to conclude with an analogy, like, this is most spoken analogy again. If we consider the age of the evolution of the earth under 24 hours, humans been just there for 3 seconds. And we are so much focusing on like how human can bring so much of solution. We just leave about the entire 24-hour of evolution process, which is quite starking. And sorry, like I took more time. My background is like I'm a wildlife biologist and a conservationist for all my life. So when we talk about the larger planetary scale problems, we miss about everything about the planet's natural systems. So yeah, maybe we should educate ourselves and also probably the entire forum, so we think or align with the biodiversity principles as well. Thank you so much.
Last question, and we are fortunate in having Dr. Gulati to ask.
No questions, just a good news. With the institutions I have been associated, Controller and Auditor General of India is looking into audits now on major schemes from environmental angle. So what is happening to that? So the process has begun. I think we need to focus more on that.
I think that's a very welcome thing because, over the years, the CAG has moved from, financial audit to, performance audit. And I was there last in the ministry when they started social audit, which actually came out of Narega, if people will remember. So it's very welcome that they are looking at climate audits. And I think given their, strength, expertise and background, over time, they will develop that knowledge that enables them to conduct that kind of audit. Yeah.
An observation. Yeah, I think on that, if CAG is doing on the government scheme, I would really expect that SEBI to do for the industries, at least for the first 1,000 industries, to do this environmental audit and see that how sustainable they are in their businesses. It's good for them as well. Yeah, everything.
Sorry to say, I have a follow-up question and the last one, please. And I've been waiting to ask this question. Is that all right? If I ask?
Right. I think the lady has the last word.
No, that's fine, and somebody else can also go for it. My simple question is that we know that there are issues in the climate. I don't know if it's a regulatory problem or not. I'm from the corporate sector too, and I've been working in sustainable finance. What stops us from banning certain items, like, for example, even urea we talked about it. Diesel is still surviving in the environment. So these are practical things. When we can ban medicines, that are harmful for the health, these are harmful for our health as well. So what stops us from doing that?
You mentioned urea, banning urea.
Banning urea, if it is also,
well, just to give an example, and I must.
And it's
plead
subsidized.
guilty. Yeah, I must plead guilty. When I started my career, one of the jobs I had, I used to go along with the BDO and actually give out bags of urea to people because at that time, chemical fertilizer was not being used. So actually, many of the bad policies of today are good policies past the expiry date. So they were good at one time. So suddenly they don't become bad, they become bad over time. It's not possible to ban completely because, as Dr. Gulati said, we will go back to PL 480, only there is no PL 480. So I think all these things have to be, you have to slowly come out of these things, wean people away from bad practices. We cannot apply a sudden shock. I think we've seen sudden shocks and they are not good. So I think we have to do this carefully. And actually, I think most of government policy formulation today is focused on how do we manage the transition between the bad policy and the good policy. People know what are the good policies. How do you manage that transition in a way that minimizes adverse impacts, particularly on the vulnerable people, smallholder farmers, women, poor people, and so on. So I think managing that transition between the good, bad and the good is the game. It's not that the end result is not known, but how do we reach there? I think that is what we're all searching for. So on that happy note, let me close the session. Thank the panelists and the organizers and Naren, and hand you over. Thank you.